Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you find yourselves, PsyTech. Welcome to What Does the Psychedelic Experience Teach Us About a New Role for Capitalism? My name is Nicole Howell. I am here with my lovely law partner, Ariel Clark. We are the principals and founders of Clark Howell LLP, which is a California-based law firm serving the cannabis, hemp, and emerging industries arena. We are each personally passionate about what we are about to talk to you about today and about psychedelics and plant medicines based on our own personal healing journeys and the role that they have served in our lives. And so we speak to you today as spiritual beings having our human experience first, and secondarily in our role as lawyers. The talk today is titled as a question for a reason, because we want you and all of the folks who are here today are here because they have a personal hook into the psychedelic experience. And so we want you to be thinking about the role that plays in your thinking about business models and organizational culture. So, Ariel, when we say the psychedelic experience, what things come to mind for you?
Well, as many studies have shown over and over again, the psychedelic experience allows a new way of thinking and perceiving. So rather than kind of following along with our existing thought patterns and ways of seeing, psychedelics allow us to see things differently and experience things differently. Also, again, as so many studies show, psychedelics really inform and kind of inspire pro-social behaviors within us. So, empathy and compassion and nature-relatedness. And really what that's about is about a feeling and a knowing of interconnectedness with all humans, with the planet, with all beings, with the cosmos. So those. Yeah, exactly. And from my personal experience and the experiences of my fellow journeyers and teachers, really when we think about the psychedelic experience, and whether that's having a particular journey with a particular medicine or deep meditation, which I include in the psychedelic experience for myself, a commonality among those experiences is a thinning of and a dissolving of the ego, at least maybe not entirely in every instance, but certainly a distance from and a lack of attachment so much to this idea that we are nothing more than these bodies walking around and these mental processes that we're engaged in, all day long, and our image of ourselves in this particular way that is, as a separate being. And rather the psychedelic experience lifts the veil of that, and it shows us, in fact, the true nature of reality, which is that we are interconnected, that there is abundance, and that we are one in a sense. And so when we experience ourselves to be, boundless and so much more, as you mentioned, Ariel, we find ourselves interconnected. We find ourselves feeling connected to the environment in which we live, and that we know ourselves to be exactly what we are in that present moment. Yeah, well, okay, so that's the experience of psychedelics for us and for so many of us. So what does that have to do with capitalism?
Yeah, well, exactly. In a word, everything. The concepts of capitalism and free markets and profiteering, and all the ways that those concepts have gotten totally out of control in the environment that we see ourselves in now. Really, those are fundamentally based on an attachment to the ego. Those are based on an idea that the ego tells us that we are separate, that we are isolated, that there isn't enough, that we must scramble over one another, that it's sort of every person for themselves. And that this modern notion of capitalism and the way that it has kind of played out in our modern economy really comes from this extreme form of individualism that has developed over the last century, last half of the last century. Rebecca Henderson, in this wonderful book, Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire, she talks about it, I think, really well when she describes that after World War II, when communism and socialism were really seen in this country and in the Western world as sort of a threat to the fabric of humanity and basic way of life, this idea of extreme individualism and attachment to your, and focus on the nuclear family solely, really kind of gave birth to this idea of capitalism coming out of the Milton Friedman School of Thought, which sort of announced this tenet that the best and highest use of a business is to maximize profits for shareholders, full stop. And we've seen that we've sort of run away with that over the last several decades, and now see the impacts that has. We see the way that we've taken that to its almost most extreme logical extension, which has led to the destruction of the environment, the biggest gap between rich and poor that we've ever seen. Social and political crises abound.
Yeah, and I would say, capitalism has also been sort of the impetus behind institutions and racism and oppression and colonization and conquering. And so it's been used as sort of a justification for oppression unapologetically, and almost like kind of a hungry, insatiable ghost. So if there's a lot of illness, if capitalism in its current form in a lot of ways is a disease that we are all suffering from, why don't we just pass laws to make everything a nonprofit or something like we did in cannabis in California? For a while.
Yeah, well, it is a great question. And whether you have the perspective that capitalism can be, or the heroic spirit of business, which John Mackey and his partner here talk about in Conscious Capitalism, or you see it really as just fundamentally spiritually flawed, we have an opportunity now, and I think a mandate based on the experiences that we have with psychedelics to look for a new paradigm, to not apply this old paradigm of scarcity that would be sort of just a facsimile of what has happened in other industries. And we will squander a tremendous opportunity here if we do that. And so to your point specifically about why not just make it nonprofit, why just not pass a law, make it nonprofit and call it a day? I think there are a couple answers to that, and which are fleshed out in a longer article that will come out in Double Blind in December. So check that out. But I think succinctly, there are two reasons. One, laws are not enough. We have to create a culture, a business culture, organizational culture within this community. We're at the beginning right now. Laws they're just not enough. And number two, I think that we miss an opportunity, I think, to take the good things about entrepreneurial spirit and innovation when we put a sort of a false or put too much of a restriction on by saying just nonprofit. I think that that ignores the reality that we do live in a capitalist society, that these are going to be products or medicines that will have a supply and demand character to them. And I think an example there is with cannabis. I think what we can see, and this is a simplification, but nonprofit was mandated here in California at the very beginning in 1996 for cannabis. And what that really did is it created incentives to work around that legal system. It created opportunities for lots of structuring, lots of entities to kind of get around that system in a way. And while it was incredibly, not just well-intentioned, but came from a really fundamental need for medicine at that time, and had a lot of social ideals built into that law, and it was revolutionary politically and otherwise at the time. It eventually really offered a fig leaf for profiteering, in the end. And so by the time truly, legalization came around in 2016, it was sort of too late at that point. We had a market that had grown up under a nonprofit mandate that wasn't truly nonprofit for all those years. And so, now here we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning of something. And so, I think that we can work harder as a community to look closely at the ways that businesses can take and put profit in its proper place, recognizing a proper place for it in the hierarchy of considerations and stakeholders. What I've been calling just enough capitalism. What is just enough capitalism? That's the question for all of us to answer. The answer may be different for different organizations. But really the idea here is, there's a tenet in spiritual teaching to be in the world, but not of the world. And so I think the idea here is to think about how to be in the system, but not of the system.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, okay, so maybe we can talk about or think about some more concrete examples on how we get from here to there. And I know this is the beginning of a conversation, but what are some of those?
Yeah. First of all, I hope that we will, with the organizers, we'll have a follow-on webinar after the conference, where we will bring folks together to really talk about specifically concrete examples. And many other folks are thinking hard about these concepts. Specifically, I would say the North Star Pledge. If you haven't heard of it, please go check it out. It's at northstar.guide. Ariel and I have been very inspired and influenced by it. We, as an organization, have made a commitment to only work with companies in this space that take the North Star Pledge and are seriously committed to its implementation. It is very beautifully written, very beautifully considered, and really distills down kind of what we're talking about here today, which is that what does the psychedelic experience teach us about how to operate in the world? It starts with a beautiful tenet: as within, so without. And that's really sort of the basis of what we're talking about here today. So number one, that North Star Pledge. Then from there, there are lots of examples. There are the use of B corporations in a real, sustainable, concrete, practical way. MAPS is a great example of how a B corporation can be used. And for just generally speaking, a B corporation is a corporation that takes as its mandate, as its charge, a series of other considerations that is not just profiteering. And by the way, the Milton Friedman concept, as a corporate lawyer, I looked it up one day because I was sure that it was in the corporation's code that the fiduciary duty of an officers, directors of a corporation is to maximize profits for shareholders. Guess what? It's not actually there. So there are opportunities to create different mandates within an organization. I would say generally, let's commit to never having plastic ever, single-use plastic ever, in any packaging for any of these products. We have an opportunity before we're starting to, before they're being marketed and distributed, to do that. Let's please do that.
Nicole,
I
hi.
think
This is Deborah. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up of 1 minute left. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, that's wonderful. We're about there. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Let's think hard about branding and marketing. I of an age where it was before pharmaceutical companies could advertise on TV. And I don't know that we're any better off or healthier for having those ads constantly bombarded so that we can tell our doctors which drugs we want to take. And then finally, really radicalizing patent law concepts. MAPS has already started to do this. USONA definitely has. There's an open letter, a statement on open science and open praxis that several pharmaceutical or several research companies have taken that is also incredibly beautiful. So those are just highlights of things that I hope we can talk more about later. But really, this is our opportunity to integrate our own personal healing journey into the outward business world in which we operate. And when in that way, we really can radically heal as a whole. Indeed, it is the only way that we ever will. So thank you all so much for giving us a few minutes to chat with you and get your juices flowing on this question. We have a booth, come check us out, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much for having us. It's really, truly been an honor.